Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday morning. Happy Wednesday morning. It's hump day. It's hump day. We are in the middle of the week, and I got a word for you on today. It is time for morning manna, the text to talk and the takeaway. I got a word for you on this morning. Of course, always do. Want to share the word for you with you this morning. And this week I'm dealing with this whole thing about supporting the work of God, and how you can prosper even in this moment. Good morning, Thelma. Good morning, Ursula. And good morning, Brenda. How are you doing today? Good morning, Stephanie. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Wilkins, how are you doing today? Devery, how are you guys doing today? Sharon, how are you doing? Man, I got a word for you today. It's the text, the talk, and the takeaway. Good morning, Lisa. Holt, how are you guys doing? Text, talk, and the takeaway. And you know what? You know what I'm going to do, but you have to help me in that we got to get this word out. And the way we do it is that you have to share the manna. Got to do a watch party. You got to then share not only the hearts and the likes. You got to also kind of put in what you are getting from this word. It always helps other folk. You know what? We're in this political season. I don't know about you, but last week I was saying, hey, did you watch the convention last night? Well, this week, not so much. Not so much. I am watching a little bit, catching the highlights, but my focus is on other things this week. It's all about what you prefer to hear, I'm sure. At least it is for me. Good morning, Cynthia. How are you? Diane, how are you? Fran, how are you doing this morning? Text talking to take away leftovers. Want to deal with leftovers. How many of you like leftovers? How many of you eat leftovers? Sherry, how are you doing this morning? Do you eat leftovers? I love some leftovers. Man, you know what? That old commercial they talk about, give it to Mikey. Mikey will eat anything. Well, in my house, my kids are, and they're grown and gone, except for one. He's still hanging around. But both of them, we have family dinner on Sundays and we come together. And I will tell you right now, First Lady has those two kids, now my son-in-law, rotten because they will not hardly eat leftovers. Well, I grew up, how many of you grew up eating leftovers? Baby, if you didn't eat leftovers, there was nothing else to eat. So we want to talk about leftovers today. I'm going to talk about leftovers today. In fact, you know what? Leftovers are good. Why do I need a fresh meal every day? Sometimes I just want what was yesterday because it is seasoned altogether better. So this morning, in talking about prospering in a pandemic and talking about how do I prosper, we want to talk about leftovers. The text, the talk, the takeaway. Here it is. Here is the text. The text is in 2 Chronicles 31 and 10. And it says, listen now, I want you to get it. It's kind of long, but I want you to get this. Since the people began to bring their contributions to the temple of the Lord, we have had enough to eat and plenty to spare, because the Lord has blessed his people, and this great amount, listen, and this great amount is left over. And this great amount is left over. Let me read it again. 2 Chronicles 31 and 10. Get it. Since the people began to bring their contributions to the temple of the Lord, we have had enough to eat. Got enough. Now we're going to move into more than enough. And plenty to spare. Because the Lord has blessed his people, and this great amount is left over. Three things. We've had plenty to eat. Then we had a spare. We had plenty to spare. And then even after that, we've had leftovers. What does this have to do with you living a life of being prosperous, even in a pandemic moment? I want you to understand something. What's the context of the text? The context is this. Hezekiah is asked, he sent the word out to the whole nation. Hey, you need to bring your tithes and your offerings unto God's house. Sent the whole word out. Now, I want you to understand something. Tithes and offerings during this time were sheep, they were goats, they were ox, they were animals, they were sacrifices. They bring them to the house of God, and they have had enough. They've had a spare, and then they have had leftovers. All because they bring what they have to the Lord's house and do what Hezekiah has asked them to do. They give their tithes and their offerings. Now, I want you to get three things I want you to get in this word. The first is this: redistribution of wealth. Redistribution of wealth. Put that in your notes right there. There is what you do not get, and we typically don't understand what is happening in the text, as well as when we give and to support the Lord's house. There is a redistribution of wealth. That is really what tax system is. The tax system is, and I'm not talking about taxing in the house of God. Let me give you an analogy. Let me give you a simile, a metaphor, if you will. Look into the everyday taxation in the country. You tax, and then they redistribute the taxes. You give the taxes, 10%, 15%, 20%. Rich people don't give nothing, 30%. And then they redistribute it to businesses and tax incentives and tax credits. To those that may not have enough, they redistribute it. Now, I want you to get something. When you bring your tithes to the house of God, God then redistributes those taxes or those tithes. How? By blessing you with more than enough. By blessing you with more than enough. You don't have to worry about what political party is in charge of your taxes. When you bring your tithes to the house of God, God says, you know what? I'm going to make sure you have more than enough after this. I'm going to take care of those that are going through. I'm going to take care of my house. And I'm going to have more than enough left over to take care of you. That's the first thing you got to get, what's happening here with Hezekiah asking them to bring their support to the temple. The second thing is there is a redirecting you from your fear to your faith. There is a redirecting you from your fear to your faith. How many of you know that when you have a little, man, that's hard to break anybody off a piece? God, I know what you asked me to do, but Lord, I'm struggling. Don't you get that, Lord? You know what I'm up against. Now you want me to break you off a piece? Yes, he does. Because what he's going to do is redirect your fear to faith. What happened when Jesus tells the story of the kingdom, of when the kingdom or the king then gives out the talents in the kingdom? You know the talent. He gives 5, he gives 2, and he gives 1. Now, 2 out of the 3 invested. 1 hid his talent under a rock. You remember the story. Now, I want you to understand something. It was really all about Jesus saying, you got to change from being fearful, even though you only have 1. You hide it as opposed to investing it. If you would have some faith to invest it, you would have gotten more. Now, the terrible thing with that whole parable of the talents is that when the king or the business owner of the kingdom comes back and finds out that the one that has 1, what does he do? He takes it. My God, that ain't fair. But he says, I gave it to you according to your ability, and you hid it. As opposed to permitting me to redirect you from your fear to your faith. If you would have just had a little bit of faith, you only needed 1 talent size of faith, and I would have added to it. You would have had leftovers. Here's the third thing. There's a redistribution. There is a redirecting. Then there is when I bring and I share and do what God has asked me to do, that I might be prosperous. It revolves around community. It revolves around community. Now in Acts 2, 44 and 45, you find that the church was just beginning. It was a very famished time, a limited time, because they were a fledgling church. Things were just beginning to happen. They were put out of the synagogue, and they had no other place to go but from house to house. What they did is they had all things in common. They sold what they had. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out and sell what you have. I'm not suggesting that at all. But they sold what they had. Here is the deal. Because they said all of this revolves around us creating community. When I do what I'm supposed to do in this moment, and if you remember what I said, on yesterday, in this very moment, 35%, most churches right now that are worshiping back in their building are only worshiping at the extent of 35%. Only 6% of the churches have returned to where they were before, both in helping others and in ministry and in attendance and in all of the things that churches do. So even, and I asked this on Monday, no matter the church you're attending right now, whether it is online, whether it is in person, remember this: God's work still exists. God is still redistributing wealth. God is still redirecting your fear to faith. And God is still saying things need to revolve around the community in which I am creating so that I might have impact in the earth. None of that has changed. The pandemic did not change the assignment of the church in the building or outside of the building. So, what is your takeaway this morning? Your takeaway is this: when you support God's work, you will always have leftovers. When you support God's work, you will always have leftovers. May the Lord be with you. May his face shine upon you, give you peace. No matter what church you go to or what church you watch, make sure that you're supporting it, that you might be able to have leftovers in this pandemic moment. God will prosper you. See you tomorrow morning with more Morning Manna. God bless you. Bye now.